The QLA methodology, you know, or you should know by now, I take no credit for the way you do a QLA transaction. It wasn't called QLA, and I don't take any credit away from Andrew Carnegie, none. And I discovered it, I'd like to say on purpose, but I really can't recall back in the 70s when I figured this out. I don't, because I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't understand, and I don't like to say that I was naive, but I was naive to the fact that investment banks were not going to recommend things that they didn't earn fees off of, or at least commissions. Now, in those days, fee-based was not the majority of fees for big investment banks. It was commission-based. Now it's fee-based. So QLA is a serendipity on my part from looking at transactions and trying to look at how can I do the most amount of transactions with no money. Because even though I was dealing with wealthy clients on the Wall Street firms that I was with, for the most part, the people that are listening to this aren't those wealthy clients. For the most part, compared to I'll get around to Mr. Gates' divorce later on in the talk, but you're not even a gnat on the tail of a dog compared to those guys. And when I found out that early on in the late 1800s, Mr. Carnegie didn't like equity partners that paid up, and he liked commercial debt, it became obvious to me. And so I did it for myself for a few years, and I built Great Western primarily with that. And on that way, or as Brian QLA Rose would say, on that journey, and it wasn't a journey, I realized that there were other things that I could do, i.e., I was the first person to ever take an option on something that I didn't know in public. And that was the beginning of Great Western. Yeah, and you know the story. I was thrown out in January 1992. It's been an interesting 28 years. And the QLA Godfather idea came for, we're in a bar now. I always wanted to own a bar, a pub. I've owned a couple bars, but for those of you who know, this is the Guthrie Castle pub, which has never been open to the public, but is mine, which is attached to the pavilion, where we're now privileged to be able to give the QLA seminars because of the way it's set up. Ironically, as I said, in December, I believe, during the YouTube, we were going to plow it under, build a spa or a swimming pool or whatever. But if we had done that, we wouldn't have the room as we do, as we're blessed to have the room now. And whether social distancing, here they're talking about social distancing disappearing in the next few weeks. Whether it is or not, we can stay within the guidelines that are currently available. Now, one of the things I said early on when Corona started, it was our time. It was our time, and the kids made a lot of money. And when asked how long was it going to last, I didn't know, but I grossly underestimated. Remember, I say never underestimate how long it can be. I grossly underestimated how much money the various governments were going to put up. In my wildest dream or imagination, I wouldn't have thought that the United States government was going to put up the trillions that they have. And I would have never imagined that the British government, amongst other governments, were going to put up so much money. Now, 2 points. In most of the world, the money that's being given to subsidize businesses ends in either September or October around the world, for those that are getting the money. As long as that's happening, there's no reason for the businesses to shut down. None. They're getting government money for themselves, and they're giving, the employers are getting money that they don't have to pay back. So there's no reason. But come September, October, November, December, the businesses don't have to stay in business because there's no downside. There's only downside, there's no upside. And I believe that the zombie businesses that I alluded to last year, the businesses that shouldn't have been in business to begin with, I think I made the analogy, if you go down Piccadilly near the Ritz Hotel in London, you go down the hotel, you go 1 kilometer. There's 6 pizza joints, 3 Chinese joints, a dozen restaurants, 5 shoe shops, 1 caviar shop, which is significant. And most of them are closed now. You know, how many pizza joints do you need on a kilometer, one street? Well, we're going to find out come the end of the year. But at the end of the year, there's going to be a lot of businesses that aren't coming back. And I predicted a year and a half ago now that between 25 and 40% of the businesses wouldn't come back. I stick with that. It may even be higher than that. I also stick with the valuations that I gave back in that time. Now, when I got thrown out from Great Western, and as you all well know, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and I fell on the knife for our share price dropping 60, 70%. What was I going to do? And this is leading up to QLA. I don't know. So I tried to teach for a year at CSUN. In 94, 95, I taught an honors class, and that was very unsatisfying to me. The one thing that it taught me, though, because much of what I taught in that 94, 95 class to the 300 students that started was very much QLA based. Plus, I had pop quizzes, I had exams, I had papers, I had all the things that weren't even being done back in 94, 95. I had 1 superstar of the 300 students. And that's not too dissimilar to the QLA numbers. We probably get 1 out of 500. We get 1 out of 500. And I went on, and a good friend of mine, Bud Grubbs, a Marine officer from the Vietnam era that I've known since I'm a kid, he said, why don't you teach, i.e., the meatheads? We didn't call them meatheads in those days. And so that's how we made the segue into QLA. Now, to refresh your memory, and nobody ever brings this up, and it's not an irritation to me, but it's enough of an irritation for me to mention it now. I'm often criticized, rightfully so, that I don't give a fuck when the world ends, all those things, which is true. It's for you to save the world. But I started the seminars on a very different basis. I started the seminars for free. Because I was looking for the results. So I'd fill up an auditorium at the LAX airport, put 700 or 800 people, and I found it not fulfilling. I used to go and talk at junior high schools. Now, this is in the 90s. And the junior high school kids were too young. They couldn't grasp the concept. Now, I was going to poor junior high schools in East LA and South Central Los Angeles. And so the seminar developed, or the idea behind the seminar, and then I went back to having seminars for cheap, not very much money, to see what the results, because I've always been striving to see what were the results, what produced the biggest results, biggest meaning the most independent wealth that you could create. And that was, as I raised the price of the seminars, I got better results. As I continued to raise the price of the seminars, I got better results. Then I stopped charging for product, and I continued to raise the price of the seminars. I got better results. And as more than one student back in the 90s and early 2000s told me, the reason why we pay more attention to you, Mr. Peña, is because we've got skin in the game now. We have. And when you give everything away free on the website, that's not really skin on the game. Now, we have had many, many, many successes from just the website. As I've told you, 99.9% of all the kids that have been successful with QLA, I've never met. I wouldn't know if they walked through the door right now. But what I do know is that I just got an email today from a kid that is rolling up educational centers in Germany that he hasn't been to the seminar, and he's doing very, very well, and he's changed his life of his parents, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So the more we raise the price, the tighter we made the noose for accountability. And for those of you that know, have been to the seminar, you realize that we have homework that's you got to turn in. If you don't turn it in, you get thrown out, et cetera, et cetera. And the last 4 or 5 years that we've had that model, we've been extremely successful. Now, we've only had one anomaly. We've only had one bit of serendipity that accelerated QLA. and that has been the most recent corona. When the world was in chaos, and from chaos comes order, we were able to take advantage of that in a good way. And a lot of kids got wealthy. A lot of kids got very, very wealthy. It's quite ironic to me that when I came to my first seminar back in May, I had no idea that I'd ever create $1 trillion. I wanted to create as much individual personal wealth as humanly possible, as fast as humanly possible. I've said this many times, not tongue in cheek, but for real. If I'd known it was going to take me 27 or 25, 26 years to create $1 trillion, I probably wouldn't have started. I mean, that's just, but I underestimated the fact that not just because you're not me, but you're not as hungry as I was. And most of you watching this tape aren't as hungry as I am now. And even though I'm not too hungry now, I'm just not. All the goals that I achieved or I aspire to achieve, I've achieved. And more recently, a couple years ago, Brian Rose coined the name $1 trillion, which bottom line is we created at least 1 million millionaires. And we have some that have created 50 billion. The largest transaction in recorded history is 500 billion, which is Neom, the city of the next century in Saudi Arabia. And so we've done a lot of really terrific things. And the article in the LA Times, and when one of the persons that was interviewed was the minister that's down the road here, Brian, he's our village vicar, as they say. And when he talked to the journalist, he said that, and I don't advertise this, that I did so much good and blah, 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 and gave a lot of money. And I attribute that mostly to Sally. But as I've told you, I mean, we've seen people with low IQs and we've seen people with high IQs make QLA work. And but it all gets back down to how badly you want it. Now, when I was first referred to as the Godfather, and one of the reasons we decided to do it in a bar, because in the movie The Godfather, they have their meetings at shady restaurants and bars, and I was going to smoke a cigar in here, but the fire alarm would probably go off. That's why the atmosphere. But you don't have to know somebody that knows somebody to make QLA work. All you have to do is be selfish enough for yourself to know that you want wealth no matter what. And when you are that selfish, and I know it's a word that we're raised to have disdain for, I wish I had understood how selfish I was early on. But I didn't. Mostly probably because of my Catholic upbringing. Remember, I wanted to be a priest. During Easter, I normally watch a lot of programs about Christ's life and the robe and various things. So I looked at him again, as I normally do. And I'm not so sure I would have made such a great priest in hindsight in 2020. So everything worked out for the best. Later on in the series, perhaps the very next edition, we're going to be talking to some of my not best mentees, not richest mentees, but mentees that have used the system most successfully given their own personality. The ones that have used it like my personality, there's only a handful. Marcus Bauer being one, okay? But in 28 years, you got one or two that have my kind of dog-eat-dog, take no prisoners, kill them, burn them at the stake mentality. There's not too many around. And the older I get, the less there are, because the whole political correct system is overwhelming the planet. But we have a lot of other people that have been extremely successful because they've been able to take the steps and adapt them with slight variation to their personalities. And we're going to talk to a couple of them. You've seen them on YouTube already, but not in with the idea or the view of how if they adapted the QLA process to their own personality. There's only one or two instances where we've had super success that didn't follow all the 7 steps. Only one or two. Arguably, really only one. And for whatever reason, that personality, that person had the ability to not need the support. And basically what the 7 steps are, when you're building your personal foundation, it is a support for you. And you've heard the analogy, you heard me make the analogy that you're only as strong as the foundation you build your team upon. Well, we've only maybe had 1, possibly 2 people that have been able to do it without all the support factors of the 7 steps. And we're going to talk to at least one of them. Now, I made mention at the last seminar, one of our recent successes during Corona, and he originally was less than thrilled to come and talk. He talked at a live webinar during the seminar because he, quite frankly and realistically, considers all you competition. And that's why, over the years, a number of the QLA bots that have been super successful have not graced our webinars, since we've been giving webinars the last several years, although 2 or 3 of them have come back to the seminar. And so in the last couple of years, we've had a few Hall of Famers come back to the seminar. I rumored that another Hall of Famer is coming back this summer. It'll make his 8th seminar. 8th seminar. 7 seminars and 1 hardcore. But it's to you. It's like the templates, the infamous templates that people sell on the internet, and we've closed a number of those down. The templates give latitude for what you can say or what words you use. And the really differentiation is because not most of the people that follow me aren't English speaking, so they morphed the language they use. But we're going to talk to some of those. I'm also, no guarantees on this, I'd like to talk to a couple of big failures of the system and how they didn't make it work for themselves the first time, the second time, the third time, yet they still were able to create generational wealth. Because not everybody does it in 20, 30 months like you want to. Some take 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And as I've mentioned more than once in the seminar, the 2 longest success stories that we have are 12 and 13 years. 12 and 13 years. Now, there's nobody listening to this that wants to wait 12 or 13 years. I guarantee it. But if we can get one of those to grace the screen with me, because I see most of you making the same mistakes that the 12 and 13-year-old guys did. Not their age, but the fact that it took them so long to create generational wealth. There's certain things that, we were raised, like I'm a wannabe altar boy, Roman Catholic wannabe altar boy, and I always will be. As sick as I know it is, as fucked up as the Catholic Church is, all the damage you've done, I'm still a wannabe Catholic altar boy. That's just it. And I'll die a wannabe Catholic altar boy. That's just it. And hopefully not too many Catholics follow me. But you've got to make it work for you. For you. Because as I said, Joe goes out, crosses the street, and gets hit by a car. That's a statistic. You go out and cross the street and get run over. That's 100% real. And so we have found, but the preeminent trait that the successful guys and gals have is they didn't give up. They didn't give up. A few of them, especially early on in my 28 years, I thought it'd be a mercy fuck if I put a bullet in their head. But they never gave up. They didn't say quit. Not dissimilar to the SEAL training, BUD training. They didn't give up. And so we're going to talk to a few of those. Well, there's not a few of them. There's only a couple of them. And hopefully they'll agree They may not agree after they see this, the way I described them. But when they talk about the success, believe me, they don't tell anybody it took them 12 and 13 years. It's like they're overnight success. And that's fine.